Recording. Awesome. Excited for day two. And so great to see you as you're tuning in and just coming in live. Feel free to put into the chat. What was your biggest takeaway from day one? Welcome, Kelly. Great to see you. Hi, Helen. Hi, Jessica. Hope you're doing great. Hi, Lisa. It's always, I'm always like energized and excited to be in this conversation with everyone. Hi, Mitzi. So glad you're here joining us. And I'd love to have anyone who joined us yesterday, or if you got a chance to watch the replay. Yesterday was all about identifying that number one pattern that's coming up for you. What was your biggest takeaway, or what was maybe a new aha, something that resonated or hit you in a new level of clarity yesterday as we think about what we were chatting about yesterday. I just want to make sure I have everyone who's in the waiting room coming in. And as we get settled for today, it's always like a quick check of today. We're going to dive deeper into a little bit more of the physiology in the body and understanding. Oh, hold on, I gotta make sure I'm letting people into the from the waiting room. Helen says, I loved how you talked about what happens after 40, and that's actually a perfect system. We need to learn how to like navigate this new landscape. Yes, thank you so much. Absolutely. Well, today we're going to continue that conversation. Um, Hello, Wilhelmina. Great to have you with us. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about how these patterns show up and what we can do in terms of replenishing those nutrients and restoring our digestion. We know that gut health, nutrient health has a lot to do with how well our cells can function. Let me see what else. We have a couple more comments in the chat. I need to let my nervous system heal. Very powerful, Mitzi. Hi, Rita. Great to see you. To calm down, to make my body feel safe enough to progress. Yes, so powerful. Thanks for sharing that, Mitzi. Anyone else, if you're just tuning in here, if you want to share, we're sharing our biggest ahas or takeaways from yesterday. If you had a chance to watch the replay, if you weren't here live, that's perfectly okay. We yesterday were talking about identifying which pattern is showing up the loudest in your body so that you can have a new kind of a new approach to supporting it. I'm really inspired to share like the key here for us at this new season as our body has shifted and evolved and hormone levels have changed is about understanding, having clarity, understanding our body, and then being able to work in sequence so that we can build momentum and create that sustainability and that safety. So welcome. So excited to be here again and continue this conversation. Well, let's dive in. Let's get started. We've got a lot of material to go through today. I'm going to leave time for some Q&A at the end because I always want to make sure, we can be sharing as we're moving along. Kelly says, I went through the three types. I was very confused about the three types. After the test, I would agree to have, I've been under too much stress lately. Where do we begin? Yes. Okay. Wilhelmina says the relationship with receiving was my biggest takeaway. Thank you. Yeah. So, Kelly, I appreciate that. Sometimes we can have really parts of all three of them showing up, but usually it sounds like the stress response was the loudest. That's the one. Like I said, these things are connected, and it's like what is speaking the loudest so we can start to have that sequence and build momentum. So hopefully today you'll get some more insight and clarity to expand upon what was revealed yesterday. So glad. Are we ready, ladies? Should we dive in? Give me a thumbs up. Are we ready to dive in and get some more knowledge? Yes, let's do it. Rita's like, yes, absolutely. Okay. So, like I said, we're on to day two as a good summary, as a good recap, just to acclimate what is different in the conversation, especially for women's health in 2026 and the world that we live in. Um, First and foremost, there is a constant battle with distraction that we all face. It's just a part of the reality in the world because the attention span of the average adult is now 2.9 seconds. That makes it harder than ever to stay focused on our health goals, especially if we're thinking about something that we want for the long term, right? Most of us here, I'm assuming, we want to extend the quality of our lifespan for many decades. We're not just talking about the next 6 months. We're talking about the next couple of decades. So it's harder to do and maintain that focus, especially if trying to do it alone. Also, in our world, when we go into the grocery store, there are over 30,000 ultra processed foods. That's just what's around us in our environment. And these foods overtly disrupt hormone balance. So really being cognizant of that, I think there's obviously a lot of value in real whole foods. And there's also a reality of convenience. Like that's just what's pervasive in our environment. So navigating that balance in a thoughtful way. 2026 research describes midlife as the invisible remodeling window because for women, as hormone levels decline, their sex hormones, this is when fat mass can rise while lean tissue drops off. Even when your BMI or your total weight looks the same. I do have a little bit of echoing. I don't know if, do we have, perhaps if you haven't muted, if you could mute yourself, that would be helpful. Thank you for that. And then currently 85% of women have been diagnosed with 2 or more chronic diseases by the time they reach age 65. This is just the current stats. And I share that not to be doom and gloom, but to give a reality to living in what we're going to be talking about tomorrow is the outdated approach to women's health in midlife results in that outcome for 85% of women, right? If we want to do something different, if we want a different trajectory, then we are now at the season where we can do something different and learn to have some new approaches. So thank you for that. All right. Let's see here. So again, what has actually changed in your body after 40, or so for some women it's closer to 45, but as hormone levels change, we know that our body becomes more sensitive to stress, less tolerant to underfueling and skipping meals, more susceptible to blood sugar swings, faster to protect our energy. That means it's faster to go into that fat storing mode instead of the fat utilization mode. And it's less responsive to safety, or I'm sorry, more responsive to safety and consistency than it is to intensity. That's just the new landscape. So this isn't a failure. Your body hasn't done something wrong. It's actually an adaptation. Coming back to our whole hormone freedom method model, yesterday we talked a lot about identifying the root cause, and that's really looking at what is that primary hormone pattern that's the loudest currently. And like I said, there can be overlapping patterns. You can see 1 or 2 or 3 of those descriptions and kind of those symptoms coming up in your life. But that was really what we talked about yesterday, is decoding the starting point and then how to start to sequence. Today, we're going to be diving more into steps, replenishing nutrients, restoring digestion. These are critical for all 3 types. And it's just a matter of how we support in different ways. So if you haven't yet and you want to go back and do the hormone freedom assessment to see which pattern is the loudest for you, I'll leave this up here. We'll also pop into the chat the link so that you can take that. We just put that in thank you. If you haven't had a chance to take that yet, I would definitely encourage you to do that because that's going to give you kind of that starting point sequence. And this is really what we're the 3 different common patterns. First is that energy and output pattern. This is when you're running on low. Essentially, your metabolism isn't able to keep up with the demand, right? So it can look like brain fog. It can look like sluggish metabolism, weight gain. It can look like low motivation or low mood. Really, that's inefficient cellular conversion. So that, like, to get technical, are like ATP process, or typically our thyroid function. One or both of those are suboptimal. We're going to be looking at that a little bit more detail today. Then we have the stress response. The stress response pattern is really when there's like an activation of your sympathetic fight or flight response chronically. It kind of gets stuck in overdrive. This can look like feeling wired but tired, where you have those constant ruminating thoughts and feel like I can't shut my mind off. It's just always going, or a lot of overwhelm. It can look like energy spikes and then crash, like I'm just completely exhausted. Oh, hold on, let me see. I have some other people here in the waiting room coming in. Or it can look like, mood instability. That's the stress response type 2. And then we have the type 3 fueling and digestion challenges. And this is where it can be like bloating, digestive discomfort. It's hard to actually take in and absorb nutrients. Like your cells have a hard time receiving what they need to thrive. And we talked about how there's often this correlation in terms of physical receiving and the emotional receiving, the ability to receive support, the ability to take in and really let go of, you know, having everything on your shoulders. That often goes hand in hand with that type 3 pattern. So again, these were the mistakes that we said were most common. And I just want to put into the chat which one resonated. Again, it's always good to kind of check in. The metabolic mismatch is where you're not eating enough, metabolism isn't supported, so energy is low and body is storing fat. That was typically associated with the type 1 mistake. Type 2 is the control mindset block, where we really feel like we want to try and like do it all and do everything and manage everything for, doing it. A lot of times it's like perfectionism can get in the way, or doing something different, like feeding the family one meal and then having really a different meal for yourself. Trying to do it all and setting yourself up for failure. That's type 2, very common. And then the type 3 is really that I'm not worth it, right? Hard to admit, but sometimes it's like if we have trouble receiving, trouble taking in, and really knowing that we can fully show up for our whole self and release some of that guilt, or the the hurts that we hold on to, the protective barriers that we hold on to. Rita says the metabolic mismatch for her. Okay, anyone else? And then we have the stress hormones and sleep. Sometimes it's like I just haven't had a chance to look deeper, had somebody who could help me understand and connect the dots to these deeper layers of what's involved. Jessica says a metabolic mismatch, and I actually think it's been lifelong, like in my teens too. You're not alone, Jessica, right? Many of us, and we're going to talk about tomorrow why that is. It's part of the cultural programming that we've all had indoctrinated with. So again, this is kind of the stress hormone sleep. Increased stress puts us into that fat storage mode when the cortisol levels go up. Declining hormone levels after age 40 can increase our sensitivity. Like we said, that relative bucket I talked about, when estrogen and progesterone and testosterone diminish, the relative impact of cortisol and of adrenaline, neopinephrine and epinephrine definitely have greater influence. So it influences our metabolism. It influences our thyroid function. It influences our immune strength in a much more substantial way. Thank you, Kelly, is sharing the control mindset block. That was my number one thing for many, many years. I've done a lot of work on that, and it's still like it can still come up. It's like, this is just that continuing awareness and consciousness, and then having the tools and the system to support your longevity. All of these lead to chronic sleep, or I'm sorry, chronic, hunger and impact on our hormones and metabolism. So this is kind of just the visual. I like to see the different layers that we work with and support. Obviously, that outer layer is the one that most people think of first, is nutrition and movement. That's really important. Getting good nutrition, having good solid movement is a critical piece of optimal health. And then it goes deeper, understanding metabolic health and looking at hormones and gut. We're going to be doing that more today, and how that affects inflammation, how that affects our signaling. And then tomorrow we're going to be looking more at reset thinking. We're looking at your neurology and how that affects the nervous system and the deeper core levels of your faith and your mindset. How you can really align your thoughts and your actions and your decisions to be in integrity with that long-term vitality and that vision that you have for yourself, with the highest version of yourself. So let's dive in a little bit deeper here when we think about replenishing nutrients. What foods are going to help your body to normalize and to thrive? And I like to give a little bit of context, a little bit of support in understanding just how critical nutrients are on a daily basis. So when we think about different players that affect our hormone health, right? This is aside from the conversation of hormone replacement therapy. We obviously know that hormone levels shift and change for women, but I do like to show this visual cascade, because what's happening at the top is necessary for what can even be possible for the hormone levels down below, right? So what do I mean by that? In order to even have adequate levels of these steroid hormones, which help to give us motivation, which help to give us energy, which help to give us focus, like testosterone is helpful for like motivation and energy. And that does naturally decline in women as we get older. But some of it is, what do we have at the top of the funnel? Like, are we even consuming adequate amounts of key vitamins and minerals to be able to hold on to and to synthesize those hormones, right? So when we think about, and I often have women tell me like, oh, I've had my cholesterol has been creeping up over time. And it's just, yeah, maybe hereditary. There's definitely some component to that for sure. But sometimes it's because we aren't necessarily taking in or absorbing adequate vitamin A and adequate B vitamins to then utilize with thyroid hormone and cholesterol to use to create these downstream steroid hormones, right? So it's almost like if we don't have some of these buckets, this, and this in adequate amounts, well, then this can kind of just pile up and have an excess amount of it that's not being utilized as intended, right? So just to see how having that nourishment is critical. I also mentioned on the last page the thyroid and the liver, because those organs have a big influence over our hormone balance. Specifically, the liver, it regulates the balance of our sex hormones, our thyroid hormones, and our adrenal hormones. It produces and regulates cholesterol that we need to make those downstream hormones like cortisol and like testosterone or estrogen and progesterone. It helps to regulate metabolism. We talked about that a bit before about there's this conversion of T3 as the more bioavailable form of thyroid that helps to regulate your metabolism and keep your energy running high. T4 is kind of like the inactive form, and your thyroid creates majority of T4, like about 90% of T4, and then it has to circulate in your blood and go to your liver with nutrients to be converted into the active form of T3 so that your cells can increase their energy stores and their energy usage. So the liver plays a huge role in that. And then it regulates the production and storage of fat. It also helps to detoxify not only hormones, but also toxins in the body. So I share this because every single one of those jobs that the liver has to do requires nutrients and it requires oxygen to do those things day in and day out, 24 hours a day. So if we're not taking in adequate nutrients or breathing shallow and not having adequate oxygen, it puts a strain on the liver to be able to do all of these functions, right? And here's some statistics about the normal experience. Over 200 million people worldwide struggle with suboptimal thyroid function. Again, thyroid helps to regulate our metabolism. And women are 5 to 10 times more likely to struggle than men. Over half of these people are undiagnosed or treated ineffectively because almost every thyroid medication out there fails to address the underlying root problem, which is actually getting thyroid hormone successfully delivered to the cells, the active form, the T3 form, where it is needed. That requires strong liver function, right? This is a common experience for that type 1 metabolic mismatch. When we talk about A, it's a matter of getting the right nutrients in or enough volume of nutrients, but it's also, are we having substantial thyroid action where that can help our cells to regulate metabolism? Here's a little bit more information about the importance of the thyroid. And I don't want you to get too like overwhelmed with this, but I think it's important to give some like scientific context. The thyroid health plays a role in your metabolism and your ability to lose weight or regulate your weight. It also plays a really critical role in the amount of energy that every single cell in your body produces, including two of the most important organs, your brain and your heart. So we tend to think of thyroid as weight and metabolism. I actually think it's a much bigger indicator of how well your brain can function, and you can be sharp and remember things and recall and kind of sift through different data points and things like that. And your heart, like that's really critical too, because that requires cellular energy. Poor metabolism within our cells can create an environment that promotes and perpetuates diseases. Obviously, things like cancer, inflammatory diseases, degenerative diseases, autoimmunity, and more can be tied back to how well are our cells metabolically working, right? And thyroid affects that across the body systemically. So what is the takeaway? The big thing to take away from all of this is that in order to optimize our metabolism so that you can have more energy, balance your mood, experience restorative sleep, and release weight, the liver must receive a steady supply of nutrients daily. And I love this phrase. I borrowed it from one of my mentors at the School of Applied Functional Medicine. She used to always say, we don't keep an extra supply of vitamins and proteins and minerals in our left butt cheek. It's not like we have a pantry where these things are just hanging out every day. We literally have to take them in and have to consume them so that the liver can do the job for that day. So I just want to stop here. I know this is kind of a lot of content and a lot of information, but what's dropping in as I'm sharing this? Anyone have any question or any new aha, or maybe it really landed in a new way for you to think about metabolism and think about our nutrient needs? Who wants to share? Anyone want to share? Anyone? I can pick on people. Deirdre knows this. I'll be like, what came up for you? Or um, oh, Rita, yes. Feel free to unmute. What's coming up?
So I've had my thyroid levels checked, and they've always been normal. But
Okay.
since for the last year, I've noticed more belly fat. And I have done the keto diet, I've done the paleo diet, I've done intermittent fasting. I have a very clean diet. I don't eat a lot of processed foods. I've decreased
Hmm.
my sugar. I don't drink alcohol. I do all the
Yeah.
things. And I haven't seen a direct link between my behaviors. Sometimes all of a sudden in the mysteriously the next day, things will disappear. Like I'll feel
Okay.
like, and then I'll think, is it the creatine? I just had cake last night, which I never have, and all of a sudden this morning, how did that happen? So it feels very random.
It feels, yes. Okay.
So, um, So I guess what I'm saying is I don't know if it could be maybe a thyroid issue that's a new thing or that I don't know about, or now I'm dying to know, what do you feed your liver that's going to help it be healthier? I feel like I take a lot of supplements.
Okay. Okay. Good.
um, and I
Yes.
eat pretty cleanly, so I'm kind of like curious, like, okay,
So
what
what
could
do
I
I
be
do?
doing here? Yeah.
Yes.
So
Well, first of all, let me just applaud you. It sounds like you are really conscious and really intentional with different approaches to supporting your health. I love that. When you say I've had my thyroid labs checked, typically the most common thing is to look at TSH, thyroid
yeah.
stimulating hormone. Is that the one you've had checked, or have you had a full panel?
Yes.
Do you know?
Yeah, I have a panel every year, and then I send it to
Hmm.
my naturopathic doctor, and she takes a look and says, looks good. But there
Yes.
could be maybe more things that I'm not, yeah, there could be something else going on.
Yeah, so typically the most common is to check TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, and that has a range. Typically it's like between 1 and 5, depending on how broad or narrow different labs will report that range, considered normal. Um, I definitely think it's helpful to look beyond that and look at free T3, free T4, thyroid peroxidase antibodies, TPO. It's called thyroid antiglobulins, TG. So these are different like autoimmune like antibody markers. And then also we look at the free T4, T3, not total, but free and reverse T3. That gives us more of the, because that actually shows more of less about is the TSH is actually showing is the pituitary in the brain stimulating your thyroid gland to produce thyroid hormone, or what rate is it stimulating it to produce? And it sounds like that's a-okay. What I'm talking about here is sometimes from that signal to then now the thyroid has produced hormones and it's being released in the body. Is it effectively doing the conversion, and is it available for the cells to use? Does
Right.
that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a couple more layers that we could look at to really evaluate the whole picture to see if there is something more in the thyroid hormone pathway that's coming up. And we're going to be talking about that more in this training today about what
Okay.
are the key things in terms of how to fuel your liver for that type of support.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for jumping up here. Anyone else want to have something that they want to add? I know Wilhelmina says, love knowing that the liver needs our support. Curious to find out more about the nutrients it needs. Okay. Well, should we dive in? Should we keep going, ladies? Let's do that. All right. So again, just actually read it. This is kind of what you were saying. Like I've tried many different things, right? Some women have tried Weight Watchers and 21-day fixes or keto or intermittent fasting, and they haven't yet cracked the code of what's really working for my body sustainably. I want you to know, first of all, it's not your fault. Statistics show that 80% of people who do these things, especially dieting, will gain half of that back in 24 months because these things were not designed to fix the actual root problem. Like I said, this it's just a symptom of the problem. So what we want to do is look at, in other words, what is actually going to help heal the metabolism. I like to show power in science too, because I think the data is really compelling. You may have heard me talk about this before because I think it's so profound. A 2016 study from the National Institute of Health found that this is not a lack of willpower. When we're struggling with our body changing, it's not about willpower. It's not about just, oh, I should be more disciplined or I should be able to do this. It's actually a change in our physiology. This study followed 14 of 16 contestants from the show The Biggest Loser. That was like a show that was very popular on TV where people would lose a significant amount of weight. They'd have all the, celebrity trainers and nutritionists and everyone like working closely with them for a period of weeks. On that show, the average contestant that was studied lost, you know, over 50 pounds. Their metabolism slowed by 600 calories per day. That's not a surprise. We know that when body mass changes, your BMI or your basal metabolic rate, that's the rate of calories that your body burns every day, just existing, just pumping your blood and breathing and producing hormones and doing all the things that your body does just to stay alive. That's called your basal metabolic rate. So we know that when a person's body mass changes, that basal metabolic rate is going to drop. But this study revealed that was so profound is later these contestants went back to gain weight back in the years following. However, their basal metabolic rate did not go back in the same way that you would expect. So it's not like if you dropped, your number of calories that you burned doing nothing every day dropped with it, but when they went back up, it didn't go back up. In fact, it was still lower than other people who were always at that weight. So the example is if you're at 200 pounds and you went to 150 pounds, your calories per day that you burned doing nothing dropped by 600 calories. But then when the person went back up and the woman gained back up to 175 pounds, she was still burning less calories per day than somebody who was always at 175 pounds, right? So in other words, that yo-yo dieting actually broke the metabolism. It actually hindered the process of how your body utilizes. And part of it is, again, because of the change in the nutrients and how your cells receive and take in information and then can work like a well-oiled machine. Or are they in that conserve and protect and hold on to it mode? This is very common for type 1 energy and output. I just want to come over to the comments. Okay. Okay, yeah, continue watching the recording. Okay, and then Wilmina says, my experience is very much like the woman who just shared, being very aware and intentional, yet the weight gain, not terrible, but noticeable for me. Same. Okay, yeah, for sure. You guys are definitely here. So that we're going to be talking about, again, another pattern that's common is your nervous system we know helps to manage stress. There's the sympathetic fight or flight response. There's the parasympathetic rest and digest functions. When the nervous system becomes dysregulated, you lose control. Oftentimes that control means we make the less than ideal choices, right? And decisions that can lead to hormone and metabolic problems. That may mean we're using food, distraction, or our phone to soothe. It may mean we're going to bed later than ideal. It may mean we're skipping meals because we, have a lot to get done, a lot on our plate. This is just this loop of hormone, mood, and gut problems. Like start a new routine, start a new workout plan, start a new diet. Life gets busy. Maybe there's a big work deadline or something that happens. It dysregulates the nervous system, which creates some type of change in the rhythm and the pattern. Again, using our phone to soothe and distract, or food in a different way, or going for convenience. Then we feel guilty and feel bad, and it kind of perpetuates this cycle. This is common for type 2, where that stress response is a very potent trigger, right? It's that dysregulation can happen. I'm just showing different patterns and how they can look. this happened with Donna Marie. She had tried different diets in different seasons of her life. She was stuck on the merry-go-round of diets and frustration. For her, it affected her digestion. She was taking omeprazole for acid reflux, which was involved with some of her allergies that we're going to talk about too. Struggling with low serotonin, so really had some mood balance issues and trouble sleeping. Serotonin is a precursor to melatonin that helps you to sleep. And she was just feeling very disempowered in her body. We're going to get back to a little bit how that helped her. So one of the pieces of data that I like to use when I work with women privately is micronutrient testing. Because oftentimes we can think we're eating really healthy meals, but we may not actually be getting adequate amounts to ourselves. This shows, you can see this as an example, somebody who really, really intentional, eats really, really healthy, and yet more than half of the markers weren't even in the green zone. So like being in the yellow is enough to have suboptimal function for your cells. They can't really do the job that they're designed to do really well. They're struggling. They could use some support, especially when it comes to antioxidants. That shows us that the body is like has a high level of turnover, and there's probably some buildup of inflammation happening. So this is one of the things we can do. I like to show some simple and sustainable ways to think about food so that it can stick with you for the long term. It can stick with you when you're traveling. It can stick with you on the go in different places to meet you in your life for real life. We think about, I always call it the one hand meal plan, PFFE: protein, fiber, fats, and veggies, right? So when we think about protein, again, leaning into, you'll notice I listed here animal sources of protein. That was intentional. You can certainly create a strategy that supports your cells using plant-based proteins. However, the volume changes. So when I talk about like at least a palm-sized serving of protein, that is assuming that we have animal-based proteins because they tend to be more amino acid dense. So different things like this, at least for most women over 40, 3 palm-sized servings per day, or 100 or more grams, depending on your body's physiology, your needs. The next is fiber. Fiber plays a big role in supporting, so 2 key things for, we talk about liver health. Amino acids are absolutely critical. I see it oftentimes that specific amino acids, when we do that micronutrient testing, are just not adequate. They're just not getting enough in and absorbed that your liver needs to do all of the functions to synthesize and to detoxify and to be able to keep inflammation low in the body. Fiber is another really important one. Fiber, I love legumes. You'll hear me talk about beans. Beans are one of the easiest, least expensive, simple ways to add fiber in to virtually every meal. My daughters know, like, we eat beans for breakfast, like literally to the point of like, have a can of beans, open it up, rinse them out, and drain them and add it with a side complement to some scrambled eggs and spinach or something like that. Now, some people tell me that legumes don't work well for their system, and that's definitely something to consider, knowing, where your body is. But getting an adequate fiber through seeds, whole grains. A simple way to think about this is to scoop. Like if you were to take a scoop with your fist and have at least 3 scoops of a fiber-rich food during your daily experience. So in terms of volume, a way, if you're looking at labels, is to look for something that has at least 5 grams of fiber per serving. That's typically an adequate amount for that meal to then give your gut the short chain fatty acids that are going to be helpful to fuel your liver and your different functions. And then fats, when we think about fats, healthy omega-3 fatty acids, things like nuts and seeds, and healthy oils, avocados. A general rule of thumb is 2 to 3 servings a day. You can use a thumb size serving. Some people can do well and thrive on more than this. Others, not so much so. So this is kind of like the foundational baseline, but really it's the key here is the balance of the type of fat, having it really be those omega-3 rich sources that you can see here. And then vegetables, brightly colored, variety of type and color is really important. I lean on vegetables even more so than fruits. Fruits are important as well, and fruits contain fiber and nutrients as well. Vegetables tend to have a lower glycemic load overall. So really add in and abundantly, like think about supporting your body with at least 5 full fists of vegetables every single day is a great way to fuel your liver because it needs all of those antioxidants, all of those, vitamins and minerals. So thinking about a rainbow of foods. So I want to pause here and just check in which of those areas, even if you think about as a baseline, as a foundation, which of those areas do you feel could use a boost? Maybe you're not having adequate amounts or enough of when we think of PFFV, protein, fiber, healthy fats, and vegetables. Anyone want to share what's coming up in terms of an area of opportunity? Christine,
I'll
hello.
chime in. Hi, I'm so sorry I was late. Hi, everybody.
No
Um,
worries.
so I think for me, like trying to do all four of those things in one meal is what I find challenging.
Mhm.
Um, and trying to understand, like, do I need to do them all at the same time? Or is it just about, getting those 5 grams of fiber in my meal and 5 cups of veggies throughout the day, like including snacks or something like that.
Yes,
Um,
great. Thank
yeah.
you, Christine, for sharing that and presencing that. I think you're first of all not alone, and absolutely, it's funny. I had one of my clients literally was just said she's like, "You've been saying this PFFV for so long," and she's like, "It finally just clicked with me." Um, Here's the long and the short of it is in an ideal world, are you getting PFFV in at each meal 3 times a day? Absolutely. Like I always look at it as a good, better, best, right? That's best. That's best case scenario because it's a balance for your blood sugar. It is giving you consistency. When we think about those things are not stored in your left butt cheek, it gives you consistency as your system, literally your physiology, is using and needs to pull from different elements and different types of nutrients throughout the day. So that's like best case scenario. Now, good is, am I getting them in at some point? Certainly, you can spread them out through snacks and think about this. I know that when we were working on our own personal healing journey, especially with my daughter, it was a little bit more intense. Like we were helping her heal from those seizures where I said she was having 10 to 15 in a day. And it was a huge priority to help rebuild honestly her neural pathways. We wanted to rebuild some new neural pathways in her brain so that her brain could heal from the pathway that was constantly leading to a seizure, right? And the nutritionist that we were working with at the time was like, protein is absolutely critical. Like protein is the building block of every single cell. So she was consuming 6 meals of protein per day just to get adequate amounts to help to rebuild. She was trying to build. Now, I'm just sharing that as an example because it depends on which season and where our goals are and where we are. She was also taking in fiber, and it's helpful for fiber to be spread ideally throughout the day because of the way the mechanism that fiber works with our gut health. Fiber actually binds with bile. I think of them like kind of like they lock arms like a bride and groom. They're locking arms, and once they lock, they're staying together, right? And so bile is a substance that's produced in the liver. It's intended to be kind of concentrated in the gallbladder. And then when we eat, it blends into the small intestine with the rest of our food as it's digesting and moving through the system. Bile has many really important functions. Some of those functions include sterilizing our food. So it helps to support immune system health. It also has a function of packaging and holding on to toxins and things that are meant to exit the body, including excess hormones that come from stress and adrenaline. So, in my daughter's case, part of what was a leading contributing factor to her seizure activity was really high volumes of stress and cortisol. Her eating fiber consistently throughout the day helped the bile mix with the components that are coming in and stick together and then exit the body in the form of a bowel movement, instead of, if you don't have adequate bile flow consistently, then sometimes those things that are meant to be, whether they're hormones, I've seen this happen with women with excess estrogen, or like in my daughter's case with adrenaline, they get reabsorbed back into the blood supply and recirculated. So, good, better, best. Is it useful to consistently eat these things throughout your day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and or snacks? Yes. It's a range of like, how can we work towards that? Um, Honestly, I've just had this so ingrained because we've been living this way for so long that, like, to me, a meal, when I think of a meal, I'm thinking of where's my protein, where's my fiber, where's my vegetable. And usually the fat can kind of go along with the protein or something else that's in there. But sometimes it is like add like a drizzle of olive oil over a salad or something like that. But it's like a new system to install. To start to think through that lens can be really powerful. How does that help? Is that helpful, Christine?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Um, yes, I mean, I do think about it, and then I think about how I'm kind of messing it up. Um, but yes, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, I appreciate like the honesty is like messing it up. And we can get, this is where we can get really hard on ourselves and feel like, oh, it's like this never ending battle. But I will tell you, like, this is what I help clients with all the time, is creating systems that are repeatable and sustainable until we want this to become an unconscious skill, where it's something where it's like, it's just automatic. It's just something that happens and it doesn't require a lot of extra effort. When we're learning a new skill, it takes a lot of extra effort and conscious attention, right? But when it becomes an unconscious competence, it's just how you be, it's just how you live. And that's what we want to move towards. And we're going to be talking tomorrow about doing some of the rewiring to help these things become easier and more automatic. But yes, thank you for sharing and just being honest and candid about it. This is, oh wait, hold on. Let me see who else is. Mitzi says fiber for me, especially being gluten free. Yeah, definitely, Mitzi. And a lot of it is there, you know, a lot of the carb and gluten containing products can also have fiber in them. And this is again where beans can be a huge, simple, like convenient resource. Like I add beans into, like, if I'm making a soup, every single thing I have is like a can of beans is added in for the family. Like it's become like so unconscious competence that that's a simple way to make sure that there's fiber happening on some level. Now Wilhelmina says my experience is very much like the woman who just shared, being very aware. Okay, I read that already. Sorry if there's anything else. I take a fiber supplement, but I don't do beans a whole lot because they don't agree with me. Okay, that's fair. Like sometimes they don't necessarily agree. And part of it might be having your gut heal a little bit so that they can work better for you. But these are practical and realistic explanations, very helpful. Are berries considered fiber? So blueberries have fiber. Raspberries actually have the highest amount of fiber typically. So yes, they're a great source of fiber as well. So interesting about the connection between fiber and bile. It's huge. I'm telling you, that was a huge turning point for not only my autoimmune condition, but for my daughter healing from seizures. Really, really interesting. I've been using ox bile for 2 months and it's been making a big difference. Okay, great. Yes. Okay, so let me continue. I know we still got more to share, but thank you. Oh, I'm looking at the time here and I want to make sure I get into the digestion piece. So we talk about the digestive health, obviously the gut health, and I kind of went into that a little bit, but obviously vibrant health is always linked to the health of our gut. And we're going to be talking about this a little bit more. The health of your digestion is central to the health of your entire body and mind. All disease begins in the gut, and conversely, almost all disease can be healed in the gut. I love this quote from Hippocrates, like way back in the day, they saw and made this connection. More overtly, it's great to highlight the gut health and the hormone health connection. Wellness begins in the gut. It's how we nourish every single cell. And digestion is a huge piece of this. Digestion begins in the mouth. This is the only voluntary part of digestion, is how you chew. Because once you swallow, what happens after that? It's involuntary, right? You can't just say, oh, body, excrete more hydrochloric acid. so that my stomach can break things down better or excrete more enzymes. You can't consciously control it. So the only thing that we actually have agency over is how well we chew our food, which usually correlates to, are we present? Are we in our bodies? Are we paying attention to what is going into the system? Or are we kind of just mindlessly taking in? I know that for me, this is a practice. Like this is a devotion, a practice to really prioritize nourishment enough that I'm paying attention to how much I'm chewing food, because that's the only part that I can cognitively influence. And the gut feeling in the brain axis is a real thing. The enteric nervous system, which is located in the gut, makes up 90% of our body's serotonin. That's one of the neurotransmitters in the brain. It helps to regulate sleep. Like I said, it's the precursor to melatonin. It helps to regulate our pain regulation and our mood. Also in the enteric nervous system, it creates roughly 50% of the dopamine, another neurotransmitter that is in large part influencing your focus, your cravings, your motivation, your sense of reward and pleasure. The microbial genes in our gut microbiome, those are the species, the viruses, the bacteria, the different microscopic bugs, if you will, that live in our gut. The genes in there and those bugs outnumber our own personal genes by 300 times. It's kind of mind-boggling to even conceptualize that. But that's a way of saying that the health of our microbiome species and type and variety dramatically impacts our own experience of vitality or of illness, because of how we're feeding and how we're regulating feeds them, which influences our own hormone levels, our own experience. When we think about, again, going back to the liver and the gut, they're connected. Your liver packages used hormones and toxins so that they can leave the body through the gut. So it doesn't just go to the liver and then exit, it goes to the liver, gets recirculated, passed through the gut. That's why we need to have bile bind with fiber to keep it moving out of the body in the form of a bowel movement. An imbalanced gut can essentially unpack some of those hormones and toxins and send them back into the blood supply for recirculation. There's one of the enzymes that's very common that's called beta-glucuronidase, that we need to have that in our colon, but an elevated level of that, quite literally, in many women that I've worked with, it unpackages those packaged up estrogen metabolites that are meant to be excreted, or different, like I said, adrenaline metabolites, and they're meant to be excreted, but instead it's almost like between taking the garbage from your kitchen and taking it out to the curb where the garbage man's supposed to come, somebody took the garbage bag and just ripped it open in the middle of the house. It makes a mess and it leaves it all over. That's kind of like what happens in a weird way. I'm just using that analogy. And that can cause an imbalance in our hormone system, right? Poor digestion can leave your cells underfueled even when you're eating healthy foods. And poor elimination can allow used hormones and toxins to recirculate the body instead of being removed. Again, I like to give this context of what the world we're living in now and how it has changed from even our grandmothers, right? So, or great grandmothers. 100 years ago, this is what was the typical woman's experience. They would begin menstruation around age 16. They had earlier and more frequent pregnancies. It was almost universal breastfeeding, which for most women, they don't menstruate during the time of period that they're breastfeeding. Earlier menopause typically started at age 45, a shorter lifespan, and typically the average woman would experience 200 menstrual cycles during her lifetime. So 200 hormone fluctuations during her lifetime. Now compare that to today. This is what is more common. Menses begins earlier for many girls, closer to age 12, sometimes even earlier than that. Hold on, I'm trying to give me 1 second as I let her back in. Fewer, if any, pregnancies for women, shorter or less breastfeeding duration. Later menopause, closer to age 52, is the average, a longer lifespan. And typically the average woman today experiences closer to 400 menstrual cycles during her lifetime. Now, why is that important? We just talked about the importance of nutrients and gut health, digestion, because it helps to package up excess hormones and excrete them properly from the body so that they don't cause an imbalance. Well, now we're doubling the load, right? We literally have changed that experience. And so the gut has more work to do. And it's like we've increased the demand. So now we have to be we get to be even more intentional and thoughtful with how we're supporting that demand. And there's also perhaps more xenoestrogen exposure in our environment and more stress, mental, emotional, physiological, different types of stress, which can contribute to those hormone fluctuations. So just again, context. This is like the world that we live in. I just want you to know it's like not in your head. We literally are living in an environment that has different implications on our body. And so when we have gut health and hormone imbalance, it can be causing unexplained weight gain, constipation, bloating, water retention, sluggish energy or fatigue, indigestion, ulcers, reflux, cravings for salt, sugar, or caffeine, difficulty fighting infection, asthma, allergies, chronic cough. This is a big one. And identified either low thyroid function or high or low cortisol. These are common for type 3 when we see that fueling and digestion imbalance. So I just like to give some context and background to how that can play a part in our bodies. I like to look, if you're looking at lab work and data, you can see this is just an example of the relative difference between progesterone. So up here, progesterone metabolites. Typically, a woman who is in menopause is in the purple zone, or close to it is going to be just above that purple zone. So you can see her level of overall progesterone as compared to the level of overall estrogen, significantly higher. And the body is having a hard time detoxifying and removing all of that. Another example here is like the cortisol. We can see that this cortisol curve, typically a 24-hour rhythm, starts low, increases after you wake, drops off, and is lowest before going to bed. This is a slightly, not completely inverted, but a slightly inverted pattern, which shows like there's likely something going on in her gut health and her gut microbiome overnight that's causing this evening cortisol uptick, and it even to start high for relative first morning cortisol, right? So this shows me that there's likely some aggravator happening in the gut that's triggering the cortisol response in her body. So again, data can help to give us clues about how to support your body. And most health approaches fail because they're not looking at this whole unifying strategy of putting all of these pieces together. And it's just different isolated fixes, like trying to follow, like I said, this diet plan or take this supplement, but we're not necessarily seeing the connection between all of the systems and how they work together. So I'd just like to give some background information. Again, starting with that PFFV is going to be your foundational starting point for how to fuel your liver, how to fuel your cells for ongoing sustainability. And then there's opportunities to say, maybe there's more nuanced pieces of looking at these areas of gut health and so forth. Now, tomorrow we are going to be diving much deeper into what is, like, I think the key missing piece is the nervous system and the mindset patterns that drive hormone integration. That's how can we bring this all together and make it sustainable? So like Christine says, it can feel massively overwhelming, and that's a real truth. Like that's reality. So we have to look at how are there ways that we can create more unconscious competencies so this doesn't feel like it's a heavy lift all the time and hard to do. And this is exactly what, like I said, going back to Donna Marie, you remember what I shared, like she had been kind of trying different things and spinning. And once she had the clarity to understand what her body needed, a sequenced plan that was customized for her and personalized support to help to implement that plan and make these new competencies happen just like on autopilot, her digestive problems were gone. She released the extra kind of weight that she was frustrated with around her midsection, reduced headaches, anxiety, aches and pains in her body, and feeling strong and confident. So I do want you to know, like, that is all available and possible when we start to put them together, when we have that clarity, when we can support with the appropriate sequence what matters first and get that momentum building, and then have that sustainable approach. Then our body understands what's being asked of it and like what we need, and it can start to cooperate and work with us. Again, I like to just share some inspiration so you know what's possible. Carmen, she definitely had suboptimal thyroid function that we uncovered and was able to improve how it was able to be accessed at a cellular level, eliminated her hives. She had always struggled with like allergic reaction and skin irritations. That's how it kind of presented the inflammation in her body, and released 8 pounds along the way. Donna really highlighted how like when life gets busy and full, like she had gotten recently remarried and integrated her family of 6 and moving houses. They were moving, and she's like, this was a bill that was crazy. Like, this is exactly when I feel like I have the least amount of time. So I don't want to have to do extra thinking. I just want to have clarity and prioritization. And she was able to do that while putting it all together. So um again, I'm going to pop over here to some of these questions. Let's see, is anyone else say looking forward to tomorrow? Thank you very much for the information. Yes, great to see you. But again, tomorrow, like I said, we're going to be looking at this more, the next layer, because it's not just doing one thing at a time, it's putting it all together. We do want to look at how is that nutrition, the PFFE, how is that looking for your body and your situation specifically? And then how is that affecting your gut health, your bile flow, your ability to utilize and properly, detoxify our hormones and toxins as needed. And then tomorrow we're going to add in that layer of the nervous system and the mindset. So thank you so much. I'd love to have you share, what was your biggest aha or takeaway? Mitzi says, very informative. Thank you. Christine, thank you. Yeah. What was your biggest takeaway or aha that landed today as we wrap up here? And any questions, any other questions coming up? I could see Kelly's typing something in there. Hi, Jessica. What came up for you? Bile and fiber, Kelly. Yes, those two go hand in hand. That was a huge part of like my personal journey as well. So I definitely, it was new insight, new clarity. So I love that that's a takeaway. Let's see. So good, Helen says. The bile explanation was great. Good, good, good. What about Lisa or Jessica? Any takeaways? Deirdre, any takeaways? Anything that landed or any thoughts for you? How do you take ox bile? How do you take it? It can be used as a supplement, like it can come in capsule form. So that can be helpful for some people who need some support for their bile, especially I find that for women I've worked with that have had a gallbladder removal, that is a really critical piece to help support their, like again, like I said, that antimicrobial component, that detoxification component. So yeah, great question, Jessica or Lisa. I love learning that we can proactively increase absorption of nutrients more than just eating well, learning so much. Good, good. Wonderful. Well, I am excited. Like I said, I'm super excited for tomorrow. That's like, I mean, I love all of this stuff too, but I feel like tomorrow really gets into the needle mover for all of this to come together and feel, that's the key, is like to allow it to feel accessible, sustainable, and not overwhelming. Mitzi, so many things, it's difficult to choose, like the PFFE for every meal recommendation, understanding the liver function. Yes. Lisa, yes, I have had a gallbladder removal. Okay, so Lisa, good to know for you. Then I would say having some bile support is probably a really good idea. And unfortunately, in most conventional care, that's not necessarily discussed or really explained. The role of the gallbladder is to kind of like create a like a gathering, a cluster of bile, so that when we do eat, it releases that to mix and blend with the food so that we can use that agent as a, like I said, a cleansing agent, as a detoxification agent. Without the gallbladder, obviously we still have it, but then you just have more of a steady state drip, a very small drip of bile that's being created in the liver, but it's not really ever getting that what's the word I'm looking for? Like a burst, if you will, a burst of higher volume when you're eating. So I do think that could be really a valuable tool for you, Lisa. All right. Well, thank you, ladies. So good to see you today, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Enjoy your afternoon. Have a great day. You too. Thank you.